John Felt here, and this is the Blue Water Outlook Weekly Weather Briefing for January 11th, 2025. You know what? It feels like winter over many parts of the nation with winter weather impacts, snow, ice, and cold weather. And I think you're going to see the theme of this briefing is definitely more cold weather, but not as much snow. Let's get started in today's weekly weather briefing. Well, first of all, let's start off with sort of the highlights or the weather risk over the next week or so. I want to bring out, we have these pockets of very cold air which will be expanding in week 2, and I'll be focusing quite a bit of attention on that. I also want to point out that the Santa Ana winds and the overall conditions that are forming the fires in California around LA will continue for the next couple days, maybe not quite as much, but still continuing the risk as we get into the new week. Sort of interesting, I was just hearing some information on these fires, how they're a combination of both wildfires and urban fires. And it's also that the Santa Ana winds were, even those are always very high winds, many residents were saying this was way above what they've seen before. So conditions are just ideal for very devastating fires in the southwest coastal California, LA region. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the action spots last week. In addition to the fires, we had 2 winter storms, one last weekend and one just recently. Here's the snow stripe from the one that moved from west, from Kansas, all the way to Washington, D.C. last week with pockets of 1-foot snow and many areas of 4 to 8 inch snow. Louisville, almost 7 inches. Topeka, 17 inches. Washington, D.C., 8 inches. So all the way through there, very heavy snow. Then the second system, further to the south, very significant impacts in parts of North Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and then spreading eastward as well, all the way to Atlanta where they had ice and snow. So right now, this is the winter storm, the southern track winter storm, beginning to spin up off the east coast. And behind it, we have this area of high pressure right here, and that's associated with some very cold weather. Take a look at the low temperatures this morning, single digits and teens over the central U.S. So that's going to be the story, really, I think, for a good part of the rest of the month. So if you want to take a look at where the precipitation came last week, this was the first track of that snowstorm, and here was the second one, heavy rain in this area. Other than that, pretty quiet across the nation, not too much, maybe some precipitation at higher elevations of the Pacific Northwest and the West. So we find a lot of snow on the ground heading into the middle part of January, more than we've seen in the past couple months of January. You can see very clearly the tracks of the snow, the 2 storms. And what I've been sort of mentioning, you might have seen this in my post, is this area here is where we get the snow that stays on the ground all season from a climatological standpoint. This is also the area we're looking at for the potential for spring snowmelt flooding. Well, the positive news, I guess, maybe not so much if you're in these areas like Minneapolis, you want some snow for recreational reasons, but other than that, there's not much snow. Matter of fact, there's more snow in Kansas than there is at Minneapolis and good parts of Minnesota. But this is right now saying that the risk for that snowmelt, spring snowmelt, is fairly low. That can change very significantly as we go through the winter, but right now, this is the snow that will probably gradually melt, but not as fast as you might think when you hear the forecast. Okay, so we look at temperatures last week. This is the weekly average temperature. Boy, that blue, it is really, really midwinter cold. 10 to 15 degrees below what would be normal for the whole week's average. And that purple is 15 degrees or more below what would be normal. And if we look at the lowest temperatures of the week, anything in blue, below 0. Anything in purple, 10 degrees below 0 or colder. Okay, so now let's shift over to the forecast. And what we're going to have here is we have a quick moving system moving through this weekend. Behind that, we're going to have some colder air filtering in. Then we're going to moderate towards the second half of the week. And then this is the Arctic Oscillation. We're getting into a prolonged period, maybe a week-long period of a significantly negative Arctic Oscillation. So what does that mean at the jet stream level? Well, here's the winter storm, the second one. Here's a little system coming in behind it. This is going to reinforce some colder air. Then as we get to the middle of the week, it looks pretty uneventful, maybe a moderation in many areas, maybe some snow melting. And then we get into really, I think, from this forecast discussion, the big picture here. And this is on late next week. We start to really dig out this trough here. We displace the polar vortex, it sinks south, and brings some very cold Arctic air over to not just the intensity of it, but how widespread it's going to be. Now these are 5-day chunks of temperature averages, blue being below normal. Well, you could just look at this and nothing else, and you can see these pockets of cold air pushing in. The first one, this is the first one. Then we have some moderation. This is the second one starting to push in late this week. And then as we get into week 2, it covers, other than the southwest U.S., below normal temperatures cover just about the entire nation. Okay, so that's temperature. Let's talk about rain and snow. Well, I think we're looking at maybe the south central, southeast U.S. for some heavy rain late this week into next week. But other than that, it looks pretty quiet. There'll be some pockets of heavy or some snow. But overall, anything in this sort of darker range here is just snow flurries or light snow. I wish I could get that out. And really maybe just the far upper Midwest and some higher elevations and some lake effect snow. I don't see any major storms at this time. I think the big story is going to be the cold air. Okay, so like I said, with the cold air, I think we're going to set up a pattern where week 2 we're going to have the cold air, and then this is the risk for the heavy rainfall in the week 2 period. So finally ending up again here with the risk assessment. Said it over and over. It looks like pockets of cold air expanding in week 2, and then the fire risk also continuing. That's this week's briefing. Take care.